Well, it didn't take us very long to get here. Already, we're talking about the final car of the 5 in GT7 1.31. Of course, the Mazda 3X. Not quite as powerful as the version which I believe some people were hoping it could be, which, as I recall, I think was around a 250 horsepower car, I think it was, something like that. This one comes in at 177, so more like DC2 Integra kind of territory, which doesn't sound too bad when you put it in those terms. It does, of course, weigh more than something like an Integra would have, just under 1,500 kilos, 1,480 to be exact, and part of the reason for the increased weight, as well as of course hatchbacks being bigger now than they were back in the day, is that it's all-wheel drive, which is a lovely advantage to have against front-wheel drive hatchbacks, and you can immediately feel that difference. Now this is naturally aspirated, interestingly, although you can fit it with a turbo, and of course one of the main selling points of modern Mazdas like this one is the great looking design. It is a really, really nice looking car. It definitely takes cues from the same styling book as the RX Vision, which is itself a lovely looking car, except unlike the RX Vision, you could potentially use this one for quite a few events, and you can certainly do more tuning to it than the RX Vision can. Now, in terms of its potential, with that turbo, of course, you can boost the power way up, but even if you don't, straight out of the box, this thing is not bad at all, and the point level is quite reasonable. The weight not being overly low, the power not being overly high, means that it only sits at 418, just under 419, at least at the time of this update. And of course that could change or be adjusted in future, but that's pretty low. Around the 400 region is a good point to be starting at, so what can it do? Is it worth buying? I mean, at 37,000 credits, it's peanuts in Gran Turismo, so of course why not buy it at this point? But in terms of its usability, well, all you really need to do is ask pretty much any member of the community, here on the channel at least, and I'm sure beyond, because a ton of people are really happy with this car. Loads and loads of positive feedback. In fact, I've seen very little, if any, negative feedback, which is a really pleasant surprise, because usually this is the kind of car that people would say, oh, why is that in the pack? Why is that there and not some better option? I guess maybe because the Toyota Alphard has been getting a bit more of that from the community at large, but even then it's pretty positive overall, so it's quite nice to see that this pack of 5 cars has been very well received, including even this one, which is by far the most quote-unquote normal car of the 5. Now, of course, having four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, it means it's good on and off-road. You can make yourself a really nice little rallycross style car out of it, or even just use it as a street tuner kind of machine, go up against your Ford Focus RSs and the like. And for, again, its power level of 177 horses, it's very punchy. This thing can do a lot with a relatively modest amount of power. 177 horsepower these days is not what it was a couple of decades ago. As I alluded to earlier on, that's Integra territory in the late 90s. These days, that's like lower tier hot hatch territory, not even a top tier one would have, what, 350 horses now, like a Mercedes A-Class AMG or a Ford Focus RS. So this is way lower than those. This is more like entry-level Fiesta ST kind of territory, sometimes even less. And what it can do, as I said, with that power, thanks to the all-wheel drive grip, thanks to the fact it has a lovely chassis, and of course when it comes to cornering, well, Mazda kind of knows what they're doing. The MX-5, the Mazda 3 MPS that came before this, even the Mazda 6 MPS, which is another lovely example of a very, very undervalued four-wheel drive performance car. Of course, used to be in Gran Turismo. Very rarely see those in real life anymore. I'd personally love to review one because they're really cool cars in my opinion. This kind of combines a bit of all of those into one. It has that chuckability, the nice chassis control of an MX-5. It has the four-wheel drive advantage of something like a 6 MPS, but still has the hot hatch appeal of a 3, or Mazda Speed 3 as it's called in some markets, or the Mazda 3 MPS as it's called here in the UK. It's kind of a nice blend of everything that Mazda does well. The only box that they haven't ticked is giving it a rotary engine, which of course it wouldn't have had anyway, but would have been pretty cool. So ultimately, there's not a huge amount to say about this car, because it's not like it has some crazy gimmick. It's not like it's massively historically significant or an absolutely essential purchase or a collector's piece or any of those usual buzzwords. It's just a really nice little hot hatch that, for the power it's got, even if you leave it under 200, it's a car that you can do a lot with, and if you were to tune it up higher, I think this could be something of a sleeper weapon. The visual upgrades are pretty good. You can wide arch it, put a decent little spoiler on, some skirts, kind of build yourself a modern Mazda Speed 3, in effect. Get it up around 300 horses or more and you can have yourself, as I said, a weapon, certainly with that four-wheel drive advantage. So if there are those who maybe still don't like the car, tell me down below why. If there are those who do, and I know there are plenty of you who do, is there a particular race, event, a point level maybe, or power level that you find this really good for? Maybe a new OP vehicle? And of course, with all 5 of the cars now covered, we can now get into maybe a bit of tuning. I certainly do plan to release a build for the Alphard, which is essentially the same tune that I used for the review. Takes corners like an absolute monster. I might do some kind of build for this one in future, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, we do have some news pertaining to next month's update, which I'm going to be dropping on the channel tomorrow. So stick around for that. Some of you will already be familiar with it, but for those who aren't, of course, check that out tomorrow. And for now, that's it for the 5 cars in the update. So we'll have to see what arrives next month, and until next time, I'll see you then. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.